My name's Anna and I'm working for a small company called Hiring Hub, and it's been a topic of conversation for us for a while, especially being a very small development team and not necessarily having much budget or resources to try and even kind of understand it and then deal with what we needed to do for GDPR. So just quickly, Hiring Hub, we're building a kind of recruitment marketplace platform which joins kind of rated and reviews agencies to employers. So there's quite a lot of data that's kind of processed within our sites as well. So I joined as CTO end of last year, and I don't know really what that means yet, I guess, but I'm a bit of everything from desktop support to product development to WordPress developers, my most recent job title, facilities, all sorts of different things. And then there's my favourite responsibility, which is information security manager as well. So I don't know if for those of you who remember me from On the Beach, I've got really bad timing when it comes to compliance issues in this role, because I literally got landed this job title as well when it was PCI DSS, so all the kind of credit card stuff as well. So I just start here, and then my boss goes, "Oh, I've heard of this thing, GDPR, do you know what it means?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I'll find out." So that's what we've been doing for a while. Okay, so what does it stand for? So it's the General Data Protection Regulation, and effectively it's the same as the Data Protection Act of 98. And effectively there's a lot of similar kind of principles in there, or the underlying principles are the same. Now, does anybody know what the principles are? Anybody want to take a guess? How many do you reckon there are?
6.
Oh, not bad. Not bad. Now this is Q stolen slide, because obviously my slides are just text, but this one's a bit more whizzy. So I stole this, but there's 7 principles, and 6 of them existed previously. So making sure that the data was fair and lawful that you are holding, that you had a real purpose for the data that you were holding. I want a job, so it's reasonable that I'm holding, I'm giving my CV to somebody and they're storing it. That you'd keep the minimum amount of data that you might need for that purpose. That you try and keep it up to date when you're processing it. That you'd always keep it confidential and secure, and that you'd limit the forms that you'd keep it in that would be identifiable. But what's different with the 7th principle is they've really added some accountability and liability across the whole spectrum as well, which means that people are really looking to kind of tighten up on everything. There's potential fines now and reputational damage as well that comes from that. So that's why we're getting all these GDPR emails, because people are kind of panicking a little about it and trying to understand, what do we do? What does it mean? So what does it apply to? So it applies to any personal data that can reasonably identify an individual. So all of these are perfect examples of things that could include. But one thing that I learned is that it's not just personal data from a consumer perspective, it's also personal data from a company or work perspective as well. So my work email address that's held by a supplier of ours, for example, would be in scope for this as well. Okay, so what did this mean for Hiring Hub, or at least for our small team? So we figured out that there's 2 main areas where we had data and that we had to look after it. So we were controllers of our customer data, and that was our agency and supplier user data, our supplier data and our employee data. So that was data that we actually owned, and we had consent from people, either because they worked for us, and to use their NA number for the purposes of payroll, for example, or through terms of business, that agency had given us their details so that we could contact them and phone them for the purposes of the business of engaging in our kind of services. And mainly that was kind of around email, phone number, address, national insurance number, bank details, those things. Then we had also figured out that we were a processor for some data, so we didn't own it. So an agency would put forward a CV within our platform they might put forward some details for a telephone interview on our platform, but we effectively didn't own that candidate data at all. But we had to ensure that the controller of that data had consent in order to process that data on our system as well. So that's our small team. We've got 4 of us. Sorry for my cheesy grin. And as you can tell, it was a bit of a last, it was taken today. I don't wear that t-shirt, this t-shirt every day. So yeah, what did it really mean for us? Like I mentioned before, we're a really small team, we're a really small budget. And like with any kind of startup business, you really, before you invest in kind of shoring up and maturing certain things, you probably need to spend some money making sure that you've got a viable business, and security and GDPR haven't been budgeted for in our funding at all. So what did we do? So we educated ourselves pretty cheaply. You know, we didn't, although initially I kind of panicked and we were speaking to a few consultants about what did it mean. You know, £1,200 a day. We thought, well, we can find out a little bit more about this. We don't think that we need a consultant. So I have been to most GDPR events in Manchester and some other cities. Especially if they've got free food and drink, then I'm definitely there. You know, I've read blogs, we've kind of begged, stolen and borrowed lots of kind of resources and things from people as well. And really just kind of giving ourselves a basic understanding of what we need to do. And also trying to understand where our risk points were for the business. This maybe comes back to not stolen, but kind of we acquired a GDPR policy pack. And that was actually really helpful. I mean, it's pretty thick, but actually it helped us understand kind of a benchmark of where we needed to get to with all our data. So for example, it had a secure coding policy, it had a patch management policy, it had an encryption policy, password policy, data retention, asset management, all sorts of things, which gave us a basic understanding of how we should deal with some of these things and what the standards were that we needed to work towards. So that meant we could do a bit of a gap analysis and go, right, we're kind of here, you know, and we need to be here. What's all the stuff that we need to do? And then we kind of worked with the business to kind of prioritise what was important or most important. So we then decided we need to find where all that data is. We knew we had this customer data, candidate data, CV, phone numbers. But I guess with like any small company that's kind of maturing, there were, you know, things in spreadsheets, there were things on people's machines, there was various kind of servers, our live servers, test servers, staging, local machines with copies of databases on potentially. We had CDN, S3 storage, we had our backups, we had printouts maybe lying about the office. I'm making it sound really bad. It sounds like we just had data everywhere, but these are the things that we had to start looking just to make sure where is the data and then how can we make it more secure as well. Also logging and analytics was one as well, just to look to make sure that we weren't holding any data there too. Okay, so we found and we kind of mapped out all the data, and for us, because we're a small company, actually a lot of those kind of places or locations, especially from a technical perspective, were from third-party suppliers. So, you know, like our hosting, our email service, even our DevOps kind of operations is third party. So we engaged with them to help understand if they were moving to compliance and what they were doing. And actually, that was fantastic to help us learn as well. It's like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, we know, maybe we should do that as well. So that's really helped. Then, once we'd found it, we really kind of tried to understand, did we really need it? Was it important? Is it just because, you know, we haven't had a shored up retention policy that we've got quite a lot of customer data? So we actually deleted a lot of data that we didn't need, or we anonymised what we did need to keep. So that was almost an opportunity as well, because I think from a technical perspective, that's made it a lot easier to manage, cost less than storage and a lot of other things as well. Okay. So then we looked at the data that we had left and we were like, who's got access to it? So this back to kind of passwords, as Carl, you know, we invoked kind of password policies or stronger password policies. Again, being a small company, there'd been this kind of, oh, you know, I'll just borrow that password, you know, a shared password that was written down, printed on the wall, although that might be a safer place to keep it from what we were saying here. Simple things like making sure that people are locking their screen, creating a bit of a starter and leaver process. Even though there's only, there was only kind of 9 people when we started, the amount of access that had kind of been given on an ad hoc basis, and then someone would leave and there would be like a few weeks later, oh, they potentially still got a password to a live production system. It was like, we need to get a process in place to make sure that we don't do that again. So that was access to the data. And then anything that's left, any of the data that's left, looking at making sure that we're securing it as much as possible. So that's kind of the point we're at the minute, is looking at improving the encryption of our application data, but also making sure that disk encryption's on the laptops for users if they've got anything downloaded. And generally kind of continuing to create processes and assurances as we kind of grow the code base as well. So looking at, ongoing vulnerability scanning, regular pen tests, using, for example, Brakeman in the release pipeline to make sure that we're continually just checkpointing where we are. Trying to document a little bit more so that when people are coming in, they're kind of understanding how things are working, what we're using. And looking at implementing kind of privacy by design, which is something that GDPR talks about, which is really where, with any kind of new development you're doing, kind of really thinking about that data. Do you need it? Where are you going to store it? Who's going to access it? So that you can continually make sure that you kind of keep this up. So what's next? So really, I think we're going to try and work on how do we automate a lot of this stuff as we move forwards. I think because we're a small company, a lot of it is around kind of process. It's kind of process driven. We can't afford a kind of all singing, all dancing GDPR, one kind of push solution. And a lot of it is kind of workarounds and best endeavours to make sure that we can follow the processes. So hopefully as we move forward, we'll be able to automate a lot of that for the business and help them. But just generally, it's never going to be done. It's not a, you get to I think it's the 25th of May where it officially comes in, which is why your emails will be hammered, I think even more so for the next week. Apologies if you get one from us. But it's kind of one of those, it's those ongoing processes, and it's really important to kind of bed in and educate people within your teams to make sure they understand what they need to do. So thank you. You're all still awake, so let's just start.